Good morning. My name is Jane Morgan, and today I am speaking with archTis Limited. The company recently announced two major contract wins, one with a prime government contractor for the United States Department of Defence, and another with a UK-based aerospace and defence business. Joining me today to talk about these developments is archTis Managing Director and CEO, Mr. Daniel Lai. Good morning.
Good morning, Jane. Thanks for having me.
Not a problem. So, look, first of all, congratulations on what are clearly significant achievements. So let's just kick things off. Can you walk us through both deals briefly? So what is archTis providing to the US Department of Defence and the UK defence business, and what kind of value and timeframes are attached to each?
Well, I'll answer that in the two parts. The first part is a little bit about what archTis does. archTis is a data-centric security company, and we sell products and platforms that protect the data within the enterprise and beyond the enterprise boundary. And we do this through a technology called attribute-based access control. And whilst we have several products, these two deals were primarily for NC Protect, which is our product for Microsoft. Why is this important? Well, because traditionally organizations have secured information at the network boundary. And with the spate of successful cyber attacks that we've seen over the years, state actors and organized crime and everything else, they now assume that the network is contested or compromised. And so that means there's a major shift to protecting the most valuable asset that you have, which is the data itself. And that's what archTis does. And that's particularly important for sensitive and classified information, particularly for governments, defense agencies, and intelligence agencies. Now, the second part of that question was about value and timeframes. And well, the real values of these deals are not the dollar amount. I've said previously, this is the best small deal I've ever done with the US DoD. And the real value in this is that we have validated a global market need and validated our products that meet that global market need and our ability as a company to execute and penetrate those markets, and particularly with that US DoD deal, the largest military market in the world, and with the UK deal, the ability to service the industry that supports that, which is the defence industrial base. So that opens very much a global network growth effect on a license count deal for the company and archTis, and that's why it's particularly exciting.
We'll get into the actual announcements a little bit later on, but for those who are new to archTis, can you just explain what NC Protect does and why it's such a strong fit for customers in the defence and national security space?
We have several products in the marketplace. We have Cogency, which is a product for collaboration and controlling information, particularly for those organizations that need to keep that control of that information. It's become one of the largest products in Australia for the defence industrial base and sharing of that information. And we also have another product there called Trusted Data Integration, which really controls and secures structured data for big data analytics, AI, and other areas of that. But this product, NC Protect, why this was important was because these are for securing Microsoft documents such as Word, PowerPoint, Excel, Teams. And of course, both defense departments and the defense industrial base are huge users of Microsoft products, particularly in the cloud and on-premise. And of course, NC Protect secures those documents and allows access and what you can do with those documents at the data layer. And that's really important. We are a partner with Microsoft for data-centric security and particularly ABAC. And we're one of the only partners with Microsoft that does that.
Look, as expected, both these customers would have gone through an extensive validation process. So can you explain what that sort of evaluation phase involves and why is it so critical in that defense procurement phase?
Yeah, sure. Look, as you can imagine, there's no tougher compliance regime or process for security than the US DoD. They also have access to all the products in the marketplace, so they can test and evaluate these different products. We go through a stringent compliance evaluation, and we've been put through our paces and submitted the product to all of that testing and evaluation. So this is not our first rodeo. Cogency is another product that also has accreditations with the US as well. And so we're very proud that the product has stood up to that regime. been, evaluated against other products and has been selected by the US DoD to this point to reach this milestone. So I think that's really important that we have a validated products in the market by the actual clients themselves. That's a real differentiator for us.
Absolutely. Just onto the US deal specifically. So ArchTis worked towards achieving an authority to operate. Can you just unpack what that means and how significant is that in engaging with the US Department of Defense?
Well, the significance of this is really simple. This is the final stage, not the first. So we're not out there announcing that we've got a 2-year process to get to a commercial arrangement with the US DoD. What we've said, we've achieved a significant milestone, which is the last stage before you get to a commercial agreement. So we have been through the POCs over the last 18 months, the proof of concepts. We've done the user acceptance testing. We've submitted all the material for accreditation. And the ATO is really that last step in preparation with the system integrator to work out to do a seamless deployment of this in their production environments in the Microsoft DoD environments. So that's what initiates the commercial conversation. So that's critical for us, and that's why it's such a big achievement.
Well, just on that then. So obviously, the US Department of Defense is one of the most strategic defense markets globally. So how does securing this deal position ArchTis in the US public sector space sort of in the long term?
Yeah, I mean, just to put it into some sort of context, this US DoD deal, the US DoD, out of a total expenditure across the globe in defense, it's about $2.7 trillion. The US expenditure for the DoD is approximately 40% of that expenditure. It's enormous. So this is the largest market you can penetrate in the world. It's also the most difficult market to penetrate in the world. And we've talked about those evaluations and the access to all the products that they could have. So it is quite significant. But what's really important is that there's all of these other barriers to entry into this. And we've talked about compliance and accreditation and trust and referrals and how it works in those environments. Once you get that, you have significant barriers of entries to your competitors, and it becomes a pattern of deployment. And that's really important because once it becomes a pattern of deployment, you can see it easily adopted in very other major instances of the US federal government market and the allies, including the UK, Australia, Japan, New Zealand, etc., Canada included in all of that. So it does become a network growth effect, and it becomes an entrenched network growth effect and a very, very sticky network growth effect. So the other part of the US public sector, of course, is it's not just the US Department of Defense that deals with sensitive and classified information. There's all those 3-letter acronyms, CIA, FBI, State Department, you name it, other intelligence agencies out there as well. And then, of course, there's the state law enforcement. The US market is just enormous. An example of that also is in Australia, which we've done very well in. Their global expenditure on defence is equivalent to 1.4%. So for us to be really successful as a high growth company and a global company, we need to penetrate these overseas markets.
I'm just going to jump into the actual contract itself now. So it's beginning with 1,000 licenses, but it could scale to that 150,000, across the US warfighter network. How prepared is ArchTis to handle that kind of growth, and what was it going to mean for the actual business?
Well, it's exciting times for ArchTis. I mean, to clarify, obviously, we will need to invest in growth if we're going to maximize the potential of the opportunity that's in front of us. Well, the first dynamics you can see there is the best small deal we've ever done, 1,000 licenses. But we have already started, negotiating on what a multi-phase rollout would look like for the US Department of Defense, and particularly the agency that we're dealing with here. They have requested for pricing for 150,000 users. We know that we sold that 1,000 license in there at about 38,000 Australian dollars. Most people can extrapolate what that value would be, but obviously there's going to be volume discounts as we move forward. So people need to take that into consideration as well. But people have already started to extrapolate the future value of what this could mean. That particular agency has, up to 450,000 users in itself, but it also services the rest of the US DoD. And the clue there is the warfighter network. So there's an enormous amount of number of users beyond that 450,000 that if we are successful in this, that provides that network growth effect. And I've already mentioned the different types of allies. Some of these are coalition forces that they have to share information with in these Microsoft environments where they're sharing documents, doing Teams chats, etc., which is just the generic everyday collaboration that they do. So that's really, really important for us. And of course, the parallel market to that growth is the defence industrial base, which services that.
Let's dig a little deeper into that then. So what stood out about NC Protect during that, what I'm assuming is going to be very vigorous sort of Department of Defense evaluation, particularly in securing that sort of Microsoft Department of Defense 360 environment?
Well, as we mentioned, and it sort of alludes to the previous questions, where we are doing this in this Microsoft DoD environment, not only is there that growth through the user numbers, but there's also growth in replicated sites. Now, what do I mean by that? There are 7 Microsoft 365 DoD environments. We are doing this this is just the first one in terms of opportunity. And why did NC Protect, what was unique about NC Protect that really was successful? It was really the ease of use of it. So it doesn't interfere with the rest of the Microsoft ecosystem. It works in conjunction with it. And that comes from working with Microsoft as a Microsoft Information Security Association partner and working with their engineering team to make sure that there's no difference with the user experience, but it is secure. And of course, obviously, being through those evaluations, they're satisfied that it works in their environment to their satisfaction and does exactly what it says it's going to do. And that's obviously critical as well. But I think that's the key to it. It doesn't interfere with the user experience and doesn't add any burden onto them to provide a security layer that's critical.
Look, Daniel, so how important was the partnership with Copper River Technologies in breaking into this market and progressing through that procurement phase?
Well, we've been working for a long time on our strategic relationships. I mean, as we have moved through the years, we know that we need to get the infrastructure to be successful right. And it was really important with Copper River Technologies that we created a partnership there with Copper River because Copper River already have the trusted access, not just to the US DoD, but as I said, to some of those other federal government agencies that could be really important for our growth. Now, being a Native American and Alaskan institution, they have certain privileges in terms of their commercial arrangements and don't have to necessarily go through a whole range of different competitive processes that we would if we were just trying to do this on our own. So it was an accelerator. It was a trusted reference and capability and a commercial infrastructure that was already in place. And of course, defence and intelligence agencies like to use these mechanisms because they don't necessarily have to reveal and publish all the information that they would, and they can expedite the sales process. So a very important strategic partnership.
Let's just walk to the pipeline now. So what kind of pipeline visibility do you have on the next phases of this contract? And when do you expect investors could get some news on the potential expansion?
Well, I probably have gone through that a little bit where I've talked about not only the horizontal growth in terms of numbers and how that could play out, but also in terms of the replication of this as a pattern through the other Microsoft DoDs. But of course, then there's the Microsoft Defence Industrial Base, who most major primes such as Lockheed Martin, BAE, Northrop Grumman, there's a whole range, Boeing. We could talk about all of this. They also use Microsoft 365 and Microsoft on-prem to share and collaborate on information. And and they have to apply to the same stringent compliance requirements that the US DoD sets for their information. So we can see that pathway of expansion, really, really important to us. I think, from an investor's perspective, we had hoped that, and we'd been working on these deals for some time. We'd hoped to see that growth impact on our FY25 numbers. But what you can see now is we've got a very firm and substantial base for driving growth in FY26 and 27, because it's going to take some time not only to get this implemented and done and tested, but then accelerated through that process of growth with these opportunities. And they're not small and they're not uncomplicated, but certainly that provides a real foundation for growth in FY26, 27. And that's what we are excited about.
I think let's move on to the UK announcement now. So it marks our official entry into the UK market, which is significant. Can you tell the users just on the line, how significant is this win strategically, and how does it align to your broader global expansion plans, which I know you've already touched on, but just to reiterate?
Well, for archTis, I think the main thing was we have two focused target market areas, and we mentioned the Defence Global Base agencies, but this is the Defence Industrial Base. The Defence Industrial Base, we're dealing with larger primes which have a global presence. And so the news behind this was that we not only have we broken out of the Australian Defence Industrial Base ecosystem where we already are being successful. And a good example of that is Australian Naval Infrastructure, which has, they're redeveloping the Osborne shipyards in Adelaide for Anzac frigates and submarine manufacturing and all of those sorts of things. They share information across 28 other suppliers, just with some of our products. Now, when you expand that outside of Australia, which I've said is 1.4% of the global defence spend, and you push that into that major players such as the UK market, you can see that expansion. And this is a real success story about a multinational which has a geographic location where they're moving from on-prem services to M365 that NC Protect will be used to protect that first 400 users. That again creates a pattern which gets expanded around those other geographic locations such as Canada, the US, Australia, and can lead up to that 100,000 user base of employees. And again, so for us, it's evidence that we have not only got a market there, but we can execute that market. And that's what's exciting.
So, Daniel, the solution was selected for compliance with that UK Ministry of Defence. So what specific capabilities of NC Protect gave archTis the edge over the competitors here?
Well, this is where, having been in the business for some time now, it really pays dividends. And we're seeing people come in with new entrants into this. But archTis has been in a very privileged position. We have been dealing with the Australian Department of Defence for, over a decade. That means we get the use cases, we understand where they're going with their standards, and we are ahead of the game against most of our competitors who've just suddenly realised that this data-centric security market, which is growing at an annual compound growth rate of about 34% according to Forrester, and is the fastest growing area in cyber. And we're already ahead of that. So people are now starting to talk this talk and enter this market. But we've got all the use cases and the privileged use cases from being on the inside of defence and understanding it. So with that JSP 440, we already know what that does, and we're already designing our products to meet those standards and the rest of the standards that such as NATO and the standards there, NIST in the US, which is the National Institute of Standards and Technologies. And we are not only building our products to meet those standards, we are also advising on those standards, not only to the defence departments, but to the national standards bodies. So, we're ahead of that, and that's why we have an edge over our competitors.
Look, I think with the successful UK implementation, obviously it's going to be opening doors to that sort of NATO-aligned defence contracts that are also facing that, Microsoft 365 security challenges. So, do you have to talk to, what opportunities you might see coming out of the successful implementation?
Well, we have actually already disclosed to the market that we've already been trialed with NATO. So we were the very first Australian company back in 2017 to go to NATO to advise them on their data-centric security strategy and architecture. And we've been working with NATO for some time on how they apply that. But just over the last 12 months, we have also done a technical evaluation with NATO for on-premise SharePoint security. It's very similar to the use case that we've already got an enterprise license with for the Department of Defence here in Australia about segregating that information between those nation states. So we're excited about that opportunity, but NATO is a very slow burn. NATO, but I mean, what's really exciting about NATO at the moment is, and we've just seen Donald Trump come back and the announcements out of NATO this morning, and the commitment of those European agencies to increase their expenditure on defence up to 5%. This is a huge market which is just growing and growing and growing in terms of opportunities, and we're very privileged to be a world-leading technology with the opportunities we have in this market right now.
Look, and I think just given the importance of cloud transformation in the defence sector, how is ArchTis going to position itself as the sort of go-to security layer for that Microsoft 365 globally?
Well, as we've discussed, these two deals clearly signify to the market that we are the product of choice in these. The US DoD, as I mentioned before, have had access to all the different technologies to evaluate to solve this problem. They have chosen an Australian micro-cap company which has been doing this with the Australian Department of Defence. And that says a lot, doesn't it? So, and then we've got across the other side of the globe at Defence Industrial Base that's moving from on-prem to Microsoft 365, and there they go. They choose NC Protect because its capability and the way that it seamlessly integrates and doesn't affect the user. So, yes, cloud transformation in the defence sector is really important. Now, another example of that was how Microsoft introduced us into Japan, and we sealed that deal with NEC, and NEC are looking at building cloud capabilities for data-centric security with ArchTis products. So, this isn't just happening on these two fronts, it's happening across a whole range of these defence organisations.
Daniel, just bear with me here. I'm actually just going to change pace a little bit, but probably worth noting that the company was recently suspended from trading on the ASX. We had quite a few investor calls and emails that have come through. Perhaps if you can just address that suspension.
Yeah, look, this is just the ASX doing their job. Obviously, when a stock has made two small announcements, which are non-price sensitive, and then the share price goes up 400%, they're going to question that, and that's exactly what they have done. So we have responded to that and satisfactorily. It took some time to explain the type of markets and the opportunity, and that we think and believe that the shareholders out there are responding to the future value of the company based upon if these deals are successful and what that could potentially mean. We are just as excited as the shareholders on this, but also that we have also announced previously, back in February and again in April, that we are and have a record of inorganic growth as well, such as the Directive acquisition, and before that the Cypher acquisition as well. So NC Nuclear Cyber is another example of that. We continue to look at those things moving forward, and as I mentioned, if we're successful here, we'll need to invest in growth in the US, and of course we're also looking at strategically, what do we do with that opportunity? Do we grow organically? Can we accelerate that by growing inorganically? But we'll do that in a very measured way, as we have done throughout our history, and making sure that it's strategically aligned, it's got some accretive potential, or it is accretive, or that it comes with a technology that we can embrace and expand our offering and become a more dominant player in this data-centric security market, which is emerging. So we have answered those questions, and the rest of the information is in the public domain, but that's just the ASX doing their job.
Look, again, I'm jumping around here, but just to go back to these defence wins, which obviously, and you described them actually as pivotal milestones, what do they signal about the future direction of ArchTis in terms of that global market positioning?
Well, clearly it signals that we are a player in this space. And obviously, we look forward to providing more evidence to shareholders as we go on this journey and winning more deals, and particularly that US DoD deal across the coming months. If we can secure that really signifies the arrival of ArchTis as a global player, and has with that global growth opportunity. And I think that's very exciting for the company. It is what we have been working towards over the last 5 years. There's a lot of sweat, blood, and tears gone into that. And I know that the executive team are very excited about the opportunities it's presenting, and so is the board. But For us, it's really important that we have provided some evidence to our shareholder base, and we thank them for their loyalty, through the journey, because these are difficult and complex problems, and you have to have a unique value proposition and the technology right to win this space.
Absolutely. And I think you've mentioned in the past that sort of referral effect from these sorts of kind of high profile clients. So yeah, lots to look forward to. I'm just mindful of time here, so I might just quickly finish up here. But for shareholders and new investors, what should they be watching out for from archTis over the coming months, particularly over this next sort of second half of 2025?
Well, over the coming months, obviously, the pivotal moment here is securing a commercial agreement with the US DoD. And then again, it's going to be more of the same. It's going to be about those significant wins that we need to have through this process. But most importantly, again, more of the same, and starting to see that network of growth from these deals coming through. And that's going to be critical. Probably some investment in the US as we pivot to take that opportunity on.
Well, Daniel, thank you so much for your time today. And thank you all for joining the archTis Limited Investor Webinar. If we have missed any of your questions, please feel free to reach out via the contact details on the bottom of our ASX releases. But we look forward to hosting again next time.
Thank you very much.